Because I've heard it said that sometimes you don't get called to the mission, but for the mission president. And I was like, that's weird. Like, I didn't really totally believe that. But my mission president's wife had a lot of neck problems, like, since she was a teenager. And so she had a lot of doctors and a lot of exercises and a lot of just, like, personal, like, empathy. And she was still struggling with it. So when I had these things, like, if I hadn't had her to be there and be able to help me and just be so caring, I think that's one of the things I realized, like, part of the reason I was in that mission was for her. And then another experience was my companion was sister training leader, and my mission was kind of weird, like, only one of the companionship was, but I went everywhere with her. So we went to Minot, which is where the zone leaders were. It was a couple hours away, and we were there for a week because we had a planned zone conference. And it was one of those stories where it had been a long day and I didn't really want to go do anything else, but they're like, no, we're going to go blitz this trailer park. And I was like, okay. And it was negative 15 degrees outside, and it was kind of like a sketchy trailer park. And we only had an hour. It was like 8 when we started, and so my companion went with one of the other sisters, and then I went with her companion, and we just took off in, like, different directions. And we knocked a bunch of doors, and we didn't really, like, find anything, and it was cold and getting late, and it was like 8:55. We're like, okay, we have time for one more door. And the sister missionary I was with, she's like, hey, you should go to this one. And I looked at it and I was like, I don't think so, because it was, like, very judgmental of me, but it had just a big, like, F-150, and there were a bunch of cigarette butts, and you could see, like, work boots outside the door. So I was like, it's just going to be an oil worker that, like, we can't even go inside and teach. And she's like, no, like, we should go. So we went up and knocked, and this guy, he's probably like 65, was just, like, in a robe with, like, a wife beater. He, like, opens the door and he looks at us, and then he just automatically turns over his shoulder and he's like, honey, it's for you. I'm like, what? So this lady, probably like 60, opens the door just with the biggest smile, and she's like, sisters, come in. We're like, what? So we walk in, and I didn't think she was a member still. And we took off our coats, and she saw my name tag, and she was like, oh my gosh. She's like, McConkey? And I was like, yeah. And she started bawling. And she was like, are you related to Bruce R. McConkey? I was like, oh, he's my grandpa's brother, so yeah, he's my great uncle. And she just could not pull herself together, and she's like, you need to sit down and listen to this story. And it turned out that she grew up in Arizona, and she lived across the street when she was, like, in her 20s of someone that was a member of the church, and they got to be, like, best friends. And this member really took her in and said, like, had her come to all these activities and got her really involved in the ward and stuff. And she'd been super involved for like a year, but had never taken lessons or anything. And she went to a state conference with her friend, and there was a special guest at the state conference, and it was Elder McConkey. And she's like, it was so crazy. While he was talking, I was just so riveted, and I, like, was eating up every word he was saying. And at the end, I was like, I need to meet this guy. And she's like, along with every other person in the building. But she said that she made her way to the front, and she said that it was weird because it's almost like everyone parted. And she got up there, and her friend was like, hey, Elder McConkey, like, this is Rena. She's my friend and really enjoyed what you had to say today. And I guess he looked at her and took her by, like, one hand and then pointed at her with the other and was like, Rena, you need to get baptized. And she said that she started bawling, and she's like, I know. So she got baptized 2 weeks later, and then a few years later she got married civilly to someone who wasn't a member. He started taking the lessons, he got baptized, and she decided that she wanted Elder McConkey to seal her in the temple. So she somehow got through to him at church headquarters, and he ended up sealing her in the temple. And then after, like, a long turn of events, she got excommunicated. And that's the point where we'd found her at, is when she had been excommunicated out of the church for 15 years. But when we knocked on her door, she said that she'd been feeling lately like she wanted to be involved in the church and get rebaptized, but she didn't really know how to go about it, and she didn't really know if it was the right thing. And then that's when we knocked on her door, and that's when she saw like my name tag, and she said she just took it as kind of a sign that that's what she needed to do. And at that moment, it was honestly one of like the hardest points in my mission, because I was having a hard time with the new companion, and I was getting frustrated that I wasn't in my area to take care of my investigators there. But in that moment, I just realized that we were supposed to be exactly where we were, in someone else's area. I was supposed to knock on that door and meet that person. And it was just so cool to get to be a part of that, and to realize that God has like such a greater picture, and that even if it was just for that one lady, that I was supposed to be in Minot, North Dakota for that like moment. So that was definitely like a huge testimony builder, and something that I needed at that point in my mission, to kind of like reboost my faith and give me like an extra drive.